Apple and Technology Expectations and Desires for 2022, Part 3. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by Text Expander by Smile, the makers of world-class software. Visit textexpander.com/podcast to learn more and download your free demo. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this is part 3 in a 4-part MacVoices Live conversation. It was our final MacVoices Live conversation of 2021, and we got into a number of deep discussions about various topics. This time, we finally wrap up the discussion of Siri, touch on the HomePod and whether it should have its own ecosystem or whether the app ecosystem that is associated with the iPhone and the HomePod is adequate, and a whole lot more. So let's go back and let the panel do the talking. Jim, I want to go back to something though that you said. You said, that when this first came out, that you know too much of how the sausage is made, and therefore you didn't think it was, it was a realistic expectation to have it work. So that to me flies in the face of what Patrice said, that she thinks we should be a lot farther along than we are. So you two are sort of at polar ends of the spectrum. I mean, do you think we?
Yeah, I think when she said that, I did say I'm not expecting that, and she said 20 or 30 years. As far as I'm concerned, 30 years is the same as the heat death of the universe for me personally. 30 years ago is 1991, so it's 30 years ago. So 30 years from now is what, 2051? I don't know what we'll have in 2051, but I don't expect something significantly I don't expect something like that character from the movie in certainly 2031. This is it's a general problem of artificial intelligence, which, since the 70s and, the ELIZA program are like, oh, we're almost there. And we're nowhere near.
Oh, ELIZA.
We're nowhere near there. And, I think Siri's just sort of a souped up ELIZA.
I think all the voice assistants are basically souped up ELIZA. Now that you say that, I think there's a significant amount of what's happening behind the scenes that is a little more than if-then loops.
Yep. And, that's not going to get you very far in simulating a human.
Some humans, but not most humans.
Well, should we change our expectations then? I mean, should a requirement of using or an expectation of using the voice assistant be, if I say, hey, SYD code red, that whatever I have programmed code red to be happens?
But I think something like that's a very simple, that's just a command. But, what Patrice was talking about was a character in a movie that acts like a person.
Right.
And responds like a person. So that's a long way from just saying code red.
So it's like capable of thought instead of a reaction.
So you're talking about something that has context and remembers, what's going on, which, as somebody just pointed out, that's not true for a lot of people,
I think, I don't think we should change our expectations. Our expectations should be high. Because it is possible, is that we might be far off, but it doesn't mean that we can push in that direction.
Yeah, but that's not going to show up on our phones first. That's not the first place that's going to show up, I don't think. That technology is going to show up in research stuff, and then we'll see it trickle down. So, I don't think it's going to it's not going to sneak up on us like, oh, suddenly iOS 16 and whoa, look, it simulates a person. That's, another thing that's like that is people talk about, I haven't heard as much about it lately, but there was a lot of talk about glucose monitors and Apple Watch measuring blood sugar, and people are like, oh, maybe next year is the year. And, I'm diabetic. I have a glucose monitor on my arm. And I know that is not, Apple is not going to come up with that out of the blue. That's something that so many companies are working on, and basic research has to be done. And I'm not saying that Apple, a watch might not ever do it, but it's not going to be a surprise.
No,
it will have been done by other, more medically things, and gradually work its way down to. And that's what Apple's really good at, is taking things that somebody else has invented and then making it, spreading it to everybody.
I think you're underestimating a little bit what Apple internally, what people are working there. It's not like the olden days where there was the universities where like professors and whatever, like lab assistants would work on stuff, and then eventually some company would pick it up. Apple has a lot of really, really smart people. I've met a lot of them. A lot of really smart people doing a lot of research. I mean, they're publishing papers and stuff nowadays.
Right. So I'm not saying that people at Apple aren't going to be, on the forefront of that, but
they could invent it.
Device,
but it's not going to be a surprise. You're right.
It's not going to be a surprise because those people are writing papers. They're going to conferences. They're going to other companies. So it's not. It's not like
just like Siri wasn't a surprise. I mean, there were so many predecessors.
Yeah, and they bought that.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. That too. Yeah, but I mean, even before that, they were like Dragon is a big company that did a lot of stuff before.
Right.
Patrice, I want to make when we beat Siri to death, I had no idea that this was going to turn into a Siri show. So how about from your standpoint, any expectations or desires for 2022?
Yeah. I've written down a couple of things. One big ticket item for me is finishing things. I can name a million places where Apple has not finished things, and sometimes for years, where they start something and then they move on to the next thing and they move on to the next thing, and the old thing never gets finished. And I want Apple to finish things. I mean, focus modes, as awesome as they are, basically useless on a Mac. Like they show up, but that's it. Like you can't do anything with it. And I have very little expectations that Apple is actually going to do anything with that, because Apple seem like, I said, they seem to be, maybe there's a little bit development mentality in that. Like they seem to be excited about a new thing and not actually finishing something. So that's for me a big thing. I said I can name a lot of them. HomePod, making HomePod a first-class citizen, like that it actually has an ecosystem that developers can add things to it. Like name it whatever you want, skills, apps, connections to apps, however you want to do it, but some way that the HomePod is not limited to the three things that Apple does.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I'd love to see that as subwoofer.
Mm-hmm.
The HomePod, and then use 2 Mac Minis. That'd be perfect just for a TV set in a little apartment. Oh God, that'd be great.
Swift UI, I'm very, very excited about. I'm literally just working on a little project right now, and I really like it, but it has severe limitations still. And Apple has been pushing that for the last couple of years, and they're now adopting Swift UI in their own apps step by step. But there is a lot still to do, a lot. And that's honestly for me big thing. And then, I mean, if you really want to dream, AR headset, something like that, AR glasses, whatever. And even if they just show it off, and then it comes in 2023.
Patrice, the AR glasses thing, I would love to see that. Mm-hmm. But here's what I want to see out of AR glasses. They look like normal glasses. And they give me heads up data. Mm-hmm. And they have lenses that can refocus. So
now you're dreaming.
As long as I'm dreaming, I'm going to go dig. So now, instead of having to spend $1,500, $2,000, whatever, just on Apple Smart Glasses frames, and then spend another $1,000 on the lenses that go in them. Yes, lenses for me are very expensive. So I'm ultimately spending $3,500, $4,000 on a pair of glasses. I want to be able to buy the glasses and have lenses that are adjustable to my prescription. So then as my prescription changes, all we have to do is change the focus on the lenses.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Patrice, darn, I've lost it because there was one there I wanted to comment on. What was the one before Swift UI?
The HomePod. I think
HomePod. Okay, yes.
Yeah.
So someone explained to me, because this makes me crazy. Because I do find out sometimes that someone has written a skill for Alexa that'll do something I would like for it to do. Excuse me, a lady. I'm sorry, folks, if I triggered anything. Why is it necessary for me to do that? Why do I have to go in and edit? Why can't I mean that's the one advantage to Siri. Right now, whatever Siri does, she does, and she does for all of us with no intervention. But if I want to ask Alexa, sorry, I did it again. The A lady.
You said ask lady a few times too.
Oh, did I? Yeah, you're right. Okay. But I didn't say hey, so it's probably okay.
You got letters coming.
No, but if I want to ask the A lady, who the leaders are in this week's PGA tournament, I have to have gone in and installed the skill.
Yeah,
right. And that does not feel good. That does not feel like an Apple
mm-hmm.
An approach Apple would take. It should be all or nothing. And I guess that's why it drives me crazy with all the services or skills that are out there for the A lady, because all of the chaff, and I can't even get to the wheat, let alone bake bread with it. So that's why I sort of gave up on it. Unless somebody tells me, or a vendor tells me that for this device we have an A lady skill, I'm never going to find it. I'm never going to know about it, and I'm not going to bother with it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is an area where Apple could be much better, because and that actually already works to some extent. The HomePod has access to your phone if you let it. I mean, you can disable that, but if you let it, and that way it could actually know what apps you have and could install the corresponding things.
Well, isn't there a model for that already on the phone? You've got Siri intents, and apps can essentially extend S Lady. So yes. I think you're just proposing that they build those same kind of APIs into HomePod. That seems like there's already a model,
totally.
for how to do it. They just,
Yeah, I mean, there are some things. I mean, it's a combination of that and the Apple Watch kind of problem, because you have to sometimes install things on the device, because you're not everything is not everything is on your phone.
I guess the flip side is anybody here using apps that extend S Lady? I haven't heard.
Sure.
Doesn't seem like that's
yes.
Other than shortcuts
taken off.
Well, through shortcuts.
Well, it's the same. That's the same thing. The shortcuts go through that same API. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely do use that. But not every app, but a lot of them.
But Jim, I'm not sure that I know if I'm doing any of that, because if it installs automatically, then it's doing what it should. It's invisible to me. It just suddenly, now that I have I'm going to make it up as I go, but let's just pretend that I needed a serious skill to talk to a calculator app. If it installs it as part of installing the calculator app, then it works and it's great, and that's exactly what I want. Now I'm with Patrice.
That's kind of what Hugh does.
Well, but maybe your HomePod is also hooked to your network, so maybe just like either it could be like the watch where you install, then you have to explicitly install it, but maybe the same thing. You install an app on your iPhone and it says, "Oh, we notice you have a HomePod. Do you want to install it on there?"
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would think that probably not very many people would use it, and that's probably the calculation that Apple's doing. So they're not putting engineering time into it.
Well, HomePod is still an accessory to the iPhone.
Yeah, it's like
to some extent,
just like Apple Watch is. So Apple has the luxury of not needing to create a separate app ecosystem just for HomePod, because the HomePod in many cases is triggering through apps that are on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been times where I've given my HomePod a command and it has failed because for whatever reason it has forgotten that the app exists on my phone, and then I have to try again to get it to actually do it. The other side of that is the way Amazon does it, where they put the onus on app developers to create the compatibility that then must be installed directly on the Echo.
Yep. Amazon
can't rely on there being some other device to lean on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Although I assume HomePod will work even if there's no iOS devices around, right?
Yes. But
Right.
I mean, the thing is, usually if someone is using a HomePod, they usually have an iPhone close by. Like,
well, how do you set up a HomePod without an iPhone?
I didn't say set up. I
don't
use.
think you can.
I don't think you can.
You can use it,
but you could like give it to your parents and walk off, and they don't have any iOS devices.
Yeah, that does work.
Right.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh.
It's for me. It's not about the individual thing. It is just about Apple focusing on it and making it a real device.
Yeah.
You got to get that car out first.
This edition of Mac Voices is supported by Smile, the makers of Text Expander, a world-class productivity utility. A new year deserves a new start, especially this one. If you want to up the game of you and your teams, the best, fastest, easiest way to do it is with Text Expander. By implementing Text Expander for your team, your communications, internal and external, are automatically standardized and improved, because the same response to a question or query are easily available to any and all who might respond to it. And that response is accurate because it is exactly the same. No typos, no fat fingering, no human error. High quality information each time, every time. And efficient, since sentences, paragraphs, or even pages of information can be summoned by just a few keystrokes. So no looking up details of a problem to craft a response. It's already there, ready to go. I want you to find out what Text Expander can do for your team by going right now to textexpander.com/podcast. Sign up for a 30-day free trial or just jump right in. You will wonder how you ever lived without Text Expander. Again, textexpander.com/podcast. Thanks to Smile, the makers of Text Expander, for being the longest running sponsor of Mac Voices. I didn't mean to take us back to Siri, but that is something that I have not understood, and frankly, I think it's why I don't use the A-Lady more, because I don't know that it can do things that I would like for it to do, because if I try to do it just off the cuff, it can't do it. So it's like, oh, okay, well, she didn't know that.
Chuck, you just hit on a big problem that Amazon has not been able to overcome. And my guess is that other smart speaker device makers are dealing with this too. What Amazon has found, and this is through an internal report that was leaked, and they're not happy with it, is that Echo users learn the commands that they're going to use, and it will be less than 5 within the first 3 hours of getting the device, and will likely never do anything else with it. Mm-hmm. And within a month of people getting an Echo, only 25% of the people are still using it.
Yeah. It has a massive discoverability problem. Until we can talk to it like another person and it understands everything, as long as we have to rely on commands, it's always going to have that problem.
But I mean, for a while, I don't know if they still do it, but I know I unsubscribed, but Amazon had an email that came out maybe weekly with, all these new skills or skills you could check out. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and I wanted to reach through the internet and strangle someone if I saw one more tic-tac-toe skill. Please stop it. I mean, knock-knock joke skills and, stuff that is completely trivial And if I were 6, maybe it would appeal to me, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, it's like, who's putting this stuff together? If you want to have a children's section, and then the adults who like that stuff can go look at it, but tell me what this device can do. Can it give me reports from NASA? Can it tell me, different pieces of information that are useful or that might be relevant to me, or at least to an adult? But most of the time, it felt like it was a kid's toy that people, and look, I know everybody has to start to program somewhere. And I'm sure that some of these people were very proud of the fact that they created this, but it had no place in that kind of distribution of information, because to me, it devalued the device. And Jeff, I think you just said it really well. I know the commands I use, and once in a while I'll stumble on something that, it can do that too. That's cool. But it was an accident that I found it.
It's true. I want to get us a little bit off that topic. I have one last point that I wrote down. Not for me personally, but I think for the ecosystem, or for like the wider adoption of Macs, it would be awesome for Apple to work with Microsoft to get Windows on ARM on a Mac. Some way. I don't care how, but I think a lot of people would be, especially in bigger companies, would be very happy if that was possible. Especially since Windows on ARM actually supports kind of something like Rosetta, where you can run x86 apps on ARM.
I think that's a request to address to Microsoft.
It will require both of them.
A licensing issue.
I think
reading
it's not just it's more than that. Because it has, like, Apple has to do some stuff on the Mac side to support it. Like kind of what Bootcamp did.
Issue is resolved. There's no point in Apple spending the time to do it.
That's why I said Apple should get together with Microsoft. Them both together should work that out. I don't care how.
They've got Linux. They've got Linux. People have Linux running on M1 machines. So I think that's a purely and people are running Windows under ARM.
Insider,
but it's just not licensed. So I think that's purely a Microsoft
through Insider.
But even then, there is a lot of stuff missing, like hardware support. There is a lot of stuff missing, and the Linux side, that is kind of hacked together because there's literally no information from Apple how things work. So to say that is running, I would call that running. As I said, I just want those two companies to get together, work it out.
Now you're saying you want it to run natively, not through a VM?
VM is fine, but even as a VM right now, there are some limits. Like it does kind of work, but like there are drivers missing and stuff like that.
Yep. Listen. I know I'm going to come off as anti-Microsoft. Okay, so let's just take that as a given. But I have to ask the question. I see David grinning. Thanks, David. But are we not past the point that we need to include the Windows in the Mac world?
Yes, we are not.
We are not,
because especially in the, let's say, the corporate world. There are a lot of apps. In my company, there are a lot of apps that simply there are no Windows, no Linux or Mac versions, and you have to use that app. And it's probably an older app, or even sometimes it's a modern app, but like the company that provides it just does it for Windows.
But I guess, Patrice, that's my perception, is that the majority of the apps you're talking about are legacy apps of some kind.
Not everything.
No.
Not everything.
All right. I'm not saying I'm right about this. I once in a while I step back and say, gee, it's funny. Nobody's asking Microsoft to make sure that Mac apps can run on Windows, but it seems like we constantly are saying, well, you have to make Windows apps run on a Mac.
Well, Microsoft could not. There is no way Microsoft could make Mac apps run on Windows. That's not possible.
Right.
Okay. So then, why is it incumbent upon Apple to make Windows apps run?
I don't think it is. I think it's a Microsoft thing, but
Right?
Okay.
They've got ARM versions of their operating system. I mean, they just need to get it out there.
Yeah. As I said, like it might not require much, but I think if they both get together, they could do it. And the reason for it, to your question, Chuck, the reason is if you look at the market, it is still 90% Windows, 10% Mac.
Yep.
If it was the other way around, then most apps would probably be written for Macs.
But okay, thinking long term, Patrice, doesn't this just? I mean, right now, what you're saying is you're not going to give anybody a reason to switch because I switch the applications. I mean, if you have it, you can switch platforms and run the old stuff. But
but that's the thing. The people. I mean, as I said, fortunately I don't work in the departments in my company where I would need that right now. But we have apps like I could not work with a Mac, or I would need a Windows machine somewhere to do that because those apps simply do not run on a Mac, and that would and I'm pretty sure that prevents a lot of companies from adopting Macs because they're saying, well, this one. I mean, until we switched our reporting to a different tool, I could not do our standard reporting every 2 weeks. Because it relied on Microsoft, I think Microsoft Excel. And Microsoft Excel with scripting, which doesn't exist on a Mac. I needed the Windows virtual machine somewhere to do that. So, and as I said, like it prevents a lot of people, like it is a barrier for a lot of people to switch to a Mac, even if they want to.
Yeah,
like there is specialized software all over, like for like whatever CNC routers and so on that only works on Windows. You still might want to run you still might want a Mac because you want to design like all the assets on a Mac and then just run it through your CNC router. You don't want a Windows machine for that.
Well, I agree that it would be good for the Mac if it could run Windows. If Apple needs to do something, I haven't heard anything about what Apple would need to do, and I think primarily it's a Microsoft thing, and Apple is probably not. They're they probably don't care. I mean, they also don't care. There's some people that can't do their jobs without a 32-bit Mac app, and they're running Mojave or earlier, and I know people that are like, oh, I'm just going to keep using this machine until it breaks, or buy old machines, and I think Apple did the right thing, but that was a choice that they made that, what, we don't care. We're moving forward, and, if people can't move with us. And I think they did the same thing on the Microsoft thing. They're like, you know what, we're moving forward, and, the fact that Mac is no longer a Rosetta Stone, no, too bad.
I mean, they didn't have any other choice. Like they had to move. They had to move on, and they had to abandon Windows. They had to abandon Windows because there is no way to keep it running.
Well, they had to, assuming you thought that they had to abandon the Intel processors.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I think it was a smart move. It's paying dividends already, and it's going to pay more. But I don't think they had to. They could have not done that, and there'd still be a lot of Macs sold, and it's going to be interesting on the PC side. Like, well, what are they going to do now? They're all stuck on Windows. I do kind of question the 90-10. I think that's probably not true anymore. For one thing, I think it's more like 85-15, but that's only if you count desktop. But that's only if you count desktop computers only. So let's add iPads. There's a heck of a lot of iPads now that are being used for things. So maybe it's more like 60 Windows and 10 and then the other factor is a heck a lot of those Windows machines they're not really like, they're just like some of them are running CNC machine tools, or they're in hospitals running a piece of equipment. They're not running desktop software, and they're just part of some larger or like some bank is just like they put one on every Like Apple is never going to get that business. And those people are, I think in the business where people are deciding, I might buy a Mac or I might buy a Windows, I think Apple's share is gone way up.
It definitely has gone up, but it is a barrier. I mean, whether it's 85-15, I wouldn't count iPads because we were just talking about Windows on a Mac, so iPads wouldn't count in that direction.
Right.
But either if it's 85-15, the point is, even if it's 60-40, there's a balance. There's a balance difference, especially in the corporate world.
But iPads do count because we're talking about who, like in a corporate, what are we going to target our software for? And in a lot of places now, it's like, well, that software's got to run on an iPad also, maybe through a web version, or that's an awful lot of this Electron web stuff, and that's one reason why Apple was able to get away with, because there's so much stuff now that is not tied to Windows or a Mac. It's just web. Everybody's publishing their apps for web, and it doesn't matter. You can run it on a Chromebook. You can run it on a Mac. You can run it on Windows.
There's just too many corporate companies out there that don't want to switch. I mean, they're just too deeply invested in these these systems. So they're just not going to switch. Well, there are companies out there that are adopting Macs as a choice for an enterprise user. Yeah, you guys are. We are as well. Mm-hmm. And it's a struggle, but they're getting through it. I mean, it's the eventual time to when these systems will finally go away. But there's companies. I mean, we experience it. I'm sure you do, Patrice, too. Is getting these systems to go away? They just don't. They're just. It's a huge undertaking. There's a lot of investment to migrate off of these systems, and that's where we are right now.
Yeah, and that's my point. If we can lower the barrier by having an option for those few apps that you might need, you can use an app. That's why I think. I mean, personally, I think the virtual machine thing is probably best for that.
Great.
Okay, so
just get the two apps that you need on a virtual machine, and everything else you can have it in your Mac, and you're done.
The panel is back in the next edition of Mac Voices to wrap up finally our conversation about Siri and compare him, whatever, to an old and fondly remembered program. We talk about the HomePod and whether it needs an ecosystem of its own or whether the app ecosystem Apple already has with the iPhone is adequate, and more. That's next time on Mac Voices, and I hope you'll join us. Until then, and as always, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.